achieved.
So in a couple of months, we are about to embark on another interesting leg or addition to the mixed martial arts world as the Professional Fighters League, the PFL, kicks off. And what it's doing is it's attempting to make a more structured, scheduled approach to mixed martial arts. What they're doing, and again, I could be wrong exactly as being laid out, but from what I've gleaned, what they'll be doing is each fighter is scheduled to fight twice. And they are awarded points based on wins, when they what round they win it in, how they win it in. And then at the end of everybody fighting twice, of the 12 fighters in the division that are posted, the top 8 go to a single elimination tournament, with the winner of that tournament walking away with a cool $1 million, and other fighters taking away X amount of dollars based on their performance. It's going to be very interesting. Now, they've got a number of names in it, so it should be, I'll be curious to see how they perform. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing guys like Rick Story, Jake Shields, a number of Sean Jordan, a number of these guys in there. Rashid Magomedov, in the lightweight division, will be competing. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see how this pans out. But the big thing is the fact that you might get with the $1 million payout, and the fact I think the finalist gets $200,000. Is it $200,000? I'm not 100% sure, but either a $1 million payout possibility. You might get some fighters who say, "Look, my UFC contract's not that great, but I know I'm good enough to go and compete in that tournament and win. All I got to do is win 5 fights." And again, especially if the competition is a little bit mixed, that might be an avenue for some UFC fighters who aren't getting top billing to walk away from their contract, go compete there, and see if they can take home that cool, that cash. I think that's a really interesting idea. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it goes. It goes, and it'll be very interesting to see get some of those fighters who maybe lose their opening fight, when they get their second fight scheduled, and they know they have to win in order to crack that top 8 and get into the playoff round. I think it's going to add a cool element to it. It might flop, it might do well. Again, we'll have to wait and see, but, kudos to them for trying something new. On that note, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive, MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, I am breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 128, which will take place in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and feature 6 main card fights, including Edson Barboza taking on Kevin Lee in the now very interesting lightweight division that appears to have a champion who's going to be defending the title in the not-too-distant future. So again, I'm very much looking forward to this card. It should be interesting. I'm coming off another subpar showing. I went 6-8. So you look at how my rundown's gone this year, and again, I had 8 very strong showings, followed by I've had 3 mediocre showings. And again, it was the last 3 cards have had a number of upsets, a number of fights go the direction I just was not happy about. And a lot of people lost, so there's some upsets, some difficult fights to call that could have gone either way. It just didn't work out for me. But again, it's like I went 5-5, 5-4, and 6-8. It's the first sub 500 card I've had on the entire show. So it's certainly not the worst in the world. My bet packs will be available for $15 for this card, so it's worth delving into if you're interested. If not, keep doing what you're doing, and again, we'll see if we can make some money. And on that note, we got lots of fights to get into, so let's break down that first one. Our first fight of the night takes place in the UFC's lightweight division as New Jersey's own Jim Miller, 28-11-0 with 1 no contest, takes on New Zealand-based Dan the Hangman Hooker, 16 wins and 7 defeats. Now, Miller says he's fighting at home in New Jersey. Overall, he has a 2-4 record. Arguably, it's 2 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest, but still he's lost 4 fights fighting at home. He won the very first 2 times the UFC came here and let him compete at home. He is now winless in his last 4. And overall, he's lost 3 consecutive fights after having his 3-fight winning streak snapped. For Dan Hooker, he's won 2 in a row in 3 of his last 4, including back-to-back finishes of Ross Pearson and Mark Diakese. Very impressive. Physically, Hooker, 4 inches taller than Miller. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage, and he is 7 years younger. Now, when you look at Jim Miller, he put together a nice run to get himself back into relevancy, but against lesser competition. Obviously, Takanori Gomi no longer the promotion. He is certainly struggling. Joe Lowe's on a shell of his former self, as we've seen recently, and a very drained Thiago Alves, who came down from 170 for a 155 opportunity, one and done. Since then, he got to step up in competition. He's been competitive for the most part, but he's lost all 3 fights. Now, we have talked about in the past how he had some issues with Lyme disease. He's on a lot of medication to deal with that. It was slowing him down. It's also worth noting he's 34 years old. And for some divisions, that's not old by any stretch of imagination. But for the lighter divisions, where speed and technique are crucial, that you're starting to push that envelope when you get up to that 34, 35 range and beyond. Now, as far as striking, Miller's striking is decent. Probably his best technique is that really disruptive low, almost ankle-like low kick that he attacks. His volume tends to be hit or miss. He can put up some good numbers at times. We saw him put up 80 against Joe Lozon, 71 against Dustin Poirier in a decent fight. But then he was sub-50 against Pettis, 34 against Trinaldo. Again, those are numbers that probably in the lightweight division aren't going to be enough by themselves to get the victory. But overall, the key to his success has been his ground game. He has 13 wins by submission, 7 takedowns over his last 4 victories, and well, he's scored 1 takedown in each of his last 3 defeats. He's also 1 takedown in each of those. He's also given up 5 overall. So he has to either be put in a position to finish the fight on the mat or control his opponent on the mat and score points from top position. And he's the type of guy you don't really want to tangle with on the ground. He can catch a sub at just about any position. But at the same time, he's also had issues going for subs, not getting them, and winding up on bottom, losing position and losing fights as a result. Now, you look at Dan Hooker's number. He's been submitted twice in his career, both very early on when he was first developing. In the UFC, he's a 77% takedown defense. He did give up 4 takedowns against Jason Knight and against 2 against Yair Rodriguez, but for the most part, he stopped everything else that was thrown his way. I would say with Hooker, his length and just general size are going to be major issues for Jim Miller. It's going to make it difficult for him to get in with any consistency to either land strikes or takedowns or a combination of the two. Both will be very difficult. And we've seen Miller in the past have issues with just bigger guys. When he fought Diego Sanchez, he just wore down because Diego's size really wore on him. Now, as far as Hooker's he's improving, but there's still some vulnerabilities there. Ross Pearson, who I picked upset Hooker, I was incorrect in doing so. Pearson arguably won the first round against Hooker because he's outworking him on the feet. And then Hooker came out impressively and stopped him in the second round. I don't think Miller can maintain that type of pace over 3 rounds. It's going to be enough. Like Pearson did at least over, Pearson did it 1 round. I don't think Miller can do it over 3 rounds to get the win here. Hooker has finished all of his foes in his UFC, all of his wins in the UFC, which is 5. He's a very concerning 1-5 in fights that go the distance. Those are not good numbers in the scorecards. And, with Miller fighting at home, it could give him a push. It could help him win a decision in a close fight. But again, I said he's really struggled in New Jersey overall. He's really struggled when he gets that step up in competition. And, I'd love to take the sentimental favorite Miller here. He certainly has an avenue to victory, probably via a snap submission. But again, he hasn't beat anyone of relevance since his 2014 win over a late notice Yancy Medeiros. Everybody else he's beat is either on their way out the door or no longer in the promotion. I think Hooker keeps him on the outside, eventually catches him something possibly with a high kick, and my prediction is Dan Hooker to defeat Jim Miller by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's bantamweight division. It's a very interesting matchup. It's the 8th-ranked Funk Master Aljamain Sterling, 14-3-0, takes on the pikey 14th-ranked Brett Johns, fighting in Wales, undefeated with a record of 15 wins and no losses. Now, Sterling is coming off a brutal KO loss to Marlon Moraes. He's 2-3 over his last 5 fights, and this is a very dangerous matchup for Aljamain. Johns is not a well-known fighter. He's a fighter on the rise. He's got a very good record. He's put on some good performances, but he's not well-known to the masses, and a loss here would really put Sterling in a tough spot, probably knock him out of the top 10 and into the fringe of the top 15. Johns so far is 3-0 in the UFC. He's coming off a very impressive submission win over Joe Soto, scooping up a calf slicer in just 30 seconds. If he wins this fight, it really pushes him up in notoriety, really pushes him up the ranks, and he opens him up for another massive fight in the bantamweight division. Physically, both men are 5'7". Both will have a 71-inch reach advantage, which is interesting because Sterling usually has a size reach advantage, a sizable reach advantage. Johns comes in 3 years younger. And the first thing I wonder is, has the game passed Sterling by a little bit? Has he gone from that prospect who was on the cusp to got the opportunity, came up short several times, even though he has some decent wins, including beating Renan Barão. But now he's is he about to be passed by another prospect on the rise? For Sterling, how does he rebound? That's a big question. How does he rebound from that violent knockout against Moraes? And that can really change a fighter. The first time you've ever been finished in a fight indefinitively and just in incredibly brutal fashion. Now, as far as his other fights, statistically, even in his defeats, he has landed more strikes in all of his fights, obviously except the last matchup, than his opponents have. That's a good number. He's primarily a counter striker. He'll sit back and let his opponents close the gap before he attacks, which is great, but it can also create opportunities for them to score points when you're not matching them and look like the aggressor to the judges. He will throw a lot of kicks. His boxing looked much improved in his fight against Renan Barão in that matchup, which was a good back-and-forth war before he eventually pulled away. He's at his best when he can limit his opponent's striking, use his reach a little bit, and use those kicks to keep them out of range. He gives up just, under 2 strikes landed per minute to his opponents, and Rafael Sunsao has had the most success as far as cumulative striking, landing just 39 significant strikes. It was a very close fight. A lot of people felt Sterling could have got the victory in that matchup. Now, with Aljamain's takedowns, he's a good wrestler, he's a good grappler, but takedowns have been a blessing and a curse. They've cost him fights, they've helped him to win fights. He hasn't been, he's never been dominated on the mat. He's had issues where he's had success early and then struggled late, and it cost him a matchup. That was kind of the Brian Caraway matchup. But he's also got away from his really aggressive offensive wrestling. 12-4 were his takedown ratio in favor of him in his first 4 fights. Over his last 5, obviously an increase in competition. He's landed 4 and given up 5, so that shows a much closer wrestling ratio. Now, again, solid grappling game. He's got good top position, good ground and pound. He's a very good scrambler, and he will attack submissions from anywhere, top, bottom, and he's got them in various positions. Now, for Johns, he completed 14 takedowns over his first 2 UFC fights, and then he subbed Joe Soto very quickly, as 30 seconds into his last matchup. So a lot of his success in the promotion has come on the mat. His takedown defense has been 100%, but that's facing a grand total of 1 takedown attempt, which was against Soto very early in that fight. Sterling's going to test it. Sterling's going to put Brett Johns' takedown defense up on a block and say, how good are you? Johns isn't an overwhelming volume striker. He averages just over 50 significant strikes through his first 2 decisions. He actually, I think, in his first fight against Kongo Kok, he gave up more strikes than he actually landed. He is technically sound. He's got good combinations. Again, not very flashy, but he relies heavily on his takedowns to kind of get things back in his favor, especially if the exchanges are not going well. We really haven't seen a lot of that here. A lot of people in this match coming into this fight, a lot of predictors and experts are writing Sterling off. I'm not 100% sold on John's ability to win this fight without takedowns, without a lot of takedowns. Sterling has to avoid getting taken down early. There's no denying that. He's had issues in the past, but I think he's going to actually take the game to Johns. He's going to put him on his back. He's going to test his defensive grappling, his defensive wrestling, and he's going to find ways to scramble to better positions when it's a kind of a 50-50 who gets the better spot. I give the edge to Sterling there. Again, as the Johns' takedown defense has really not been tested. The striking exchanges will be close. I like the kicks of Sterling to keep him on the outside a little bit and eventually be augmented by his takedowns. This is probably going to be a very close fight if it goes the distance, and my prediction is Aljamain Sterling to defeat Brett Johns by decision. Our third main card fight is an interesting matchup in the middleweight division as it features former WSOF champion, the 8th-ranked David Branch, 21 wins and 4 losses, taking on another fighter on the absolute rise, the 11th-ranked Thiago Santos, 17 wins and 5 defeats. Now, coming into this, Branch, he came into the UFC with a lot of momentum, but it's dropped off a bit. He had a split decision with Krzysztof Jotko, who the shine has come off him significantly in recent action, and then he had that stoppage loss to Luke Rocco that really took him out of top contention. For Thiago Santos, he has won 4 in a row. He stopped all those opponents, and they're not big name flashy guys, but they're tough sons of bitches. Taking out Jack Marshman and Gerald Mearshart, Jack Hermanson and Anthony Smith, these are guys that come to fight all the time. They know where they're desperate because they're looking to make that jump into the top 15, and Santos took them all out in an entertaining back and forth wars in fights that weren't clear cut, easy victories until they were over. Now, physically, Branch is the taller man by an inch. He'll have a 2-inch reach advantage. Santos is younger by 3 years. Now, this fight really comes down to whether or not Branch can take Santos down. The key to Santos' recent success has been his ability to either stay vertical or get back up if he gets taken down. He's been implementing a big, very wide stance, looking to explode into offense, and at the same time defend takedowns. And he's got good takedown defense overall, especially as we saw in the Elias Theodoro fight. If he pulls you into the clinch, he can do a lot of damage if you can't land that initial takedown attempt. Overall, 70% takedown defense. His last 4 opponents are 4 for 13 on TDAs. He did lose the fight to Eric Spicely by submission. He got TKO by Giga Mousasi on the mat, so he has been vulnerable at times when he's put down. But again, when he stays vertical and can get back vertical, the guy's lethal. He got himself into some bad spots on the mat against Anthony Smith in a really entertaining fight, including getting mounted at one point. But again, he swept, got back in a good position, and won the fight. Obviously, his best techniques are his kicks. They are brutal. He'll work all areas of the body, attacking legs, the midsection, the head. He creates openings by going to one spot and then going to another, and he throws a variety of techniques. That left high and body kick have been his key to success, and they are available against orthodox strikers like David Branch. So that's something worth noting. When he took out Anthony Smith, as he's done in the past, he hurt him with the body and just shuts you down, and Smith eventually crumpled, and that led to the end of the fight. Now, his hands are improving. They're not as good as his kicks. They look better against Jack Hermanson. He throws a nice leaping left hook and a right jab, and he'll throw a flurry to end. He threw a nice flurry to end the fight to put him down. Same thing, he took out Nate Marquardt on the feet. And I liked what we saw in the Anthony Smith fight. It was a grueling, wild, unexpected battle, back and forth, guys, attacking, engaging, defending, and he held his own. He didn't panic, and eventually he got the victory. He could have easily panicked a couple spots and got finished, and he didn't, and I was very impressed with his performance. Now, David Branch is a BJJ black belt. He's very good on the mat, has good posture on the ground, good control, good ground and pound. His run run in the WSOF included 4 wins by submission out of his 7 wins overall, and he had 2 takedowns against Krzysztof Jotko, 1 against Luke Rockhold. He can show he can operate on the ground. The question is, does he opt to go there? He absolutely should in this fight, but he's kind of fallen in love with his striking of late. He did show a nice level change against Jotko for a takedown. He timed him, caught him coming forward, and that's what he has to do in this matchup. Additionally, he used that clinch to pin Jotko on the wall. He had some good head position to hold his foe there, but against Thiago Santos, you want to be very careful, because if you get in the clinch and he can lock up that Thai plum and he starts driving knees into your midsection and possibly targeting your head, you are going to be in some serious, serious trouble. You know, against Jotko, he came out very aggressively, throwing a right hand over the top. He pumps that left jab. Again, he'll work in his kicks. His output seemed to drop off a little bit as the fight progressed, and he started to reach for his strikes. He came up very aggressive against Luke Rockhold, but he couldn't maintain it as well. He was throwing punches, then clinching up, and again, he faded and got finished. Santos is aggressive. He's more dangerous and has more striking weapons than Branch, absolutely. Branch can nullify all those with takedowns and top control, whether he gets a submission or just wears them out and eventually gets a decision because Santos gets too tired to defend any takedown attempts. I think Santos will defend the early attempts to get taken down, and eventually he'll land some shots that start to hurt Branch, back him off. Look for that body kick or head kick. Probably, I would go body, and then he eventually finishes them with strikes. And my prediction is Thiago Santos to defeat David Branch by TKO. Our next matchups in the UFC's heavyweight division, as Justin Big Pretty Willis, 6 wins and a loss, takes on the Vanilla Gorilla Chase Sherman, 11 wins and 4 losses. Now, Sherman, after an 0-2 start, had back-to-back wins over Coulter and Grabowski, 2 impressive fights. Maybe not the Grabowski, the Coulter one was an absolute war. But then he lost a 90-second KO to Shamil Abdurrahimov, and that really knocked him back down after he was starting to put things together. For Big Pretty, he's 2-0 in the UFC, a decision win over Mulheron, and then a knockout over Crowder in his last fight. He has 6 consecutive victories since losing his pro MMA debut. Physically, Sherman, 6'4". He will be 3 inches taller than Willis. They will have the same reach, and I'm expecting Willis usually pushes that limit at 265. He could come in 10 pounds, 15 pounds heavier than Sherman. Sherman is the younger man by 2 years. Now, Willis, he's fairly quick for the division. Despite pushing that weight limit, he's pretty quick. But at the same time, he's had some issues with weight cutting, and if he gasses, that's going to be a major problem for him if this fight drags into rounds 2 and 3. He does have 4 wins by knockout, 3 in round 1, 1 in round 2. You know, and in his debut, he fought at a measured pace. Again, he had issues trying to make weight for the first time. I think it was on short notice, and they pulled him from the fight because it wasn't going well. But when he eventually got in there, he fought at a fairly measured pace, threw powerful strikes, landed takedowns, and it came out to be his first decision win of his career, and I like decision victories. They tell me a lot about a fighter, their ability to fight deep into a fight with a game plan, not get ridiculous, and win a fight that doesn't end abruptly. And I think it's important. Against Crowder, he came out swinging. He said, okay, my debut's under my belt. I'm going to start firing. He came out swinging, fighting at close range, landing knees in the clinch, short-range punches, and eventually put him down. He was constantly pushing forward, and eventually, as I said, he overwhelmed him with strikes and knocked him out cold. Big question is, if he fights like that, can he keep that pace up? Is it, does he go for the knockout early and look to put him away, or does he fight more measured and either, take a decision or wait for that opportunity for land that big strike and not actually not pursue it aggressively? Now, Sherman, he was showing some decent improvements in his striking attack. He's got some solid low kicks that he can cut his opponent down with and really take away their mobility. It devastated Coulter's legs, had him fighting on one leg, and really, was an impressive performance in that fight. And he's also put up 100 significant strikes in 2 matchups, and at heavyweight, that's very impressive. That's solid numbers, showing you can put up that type of volume in a couple of competitions. Now, that was, of course, before his knockout loss, the second of his UFC career. Now, he has had issues with his chin. He's been knocked out, he's been buzzed. The Coulter fight, he got hurt by a guy he got knocked out by Harris. He got almost knocked out by Coulter. A guy was standing on one leg. Coulter wobbled him. And he tends to stand very, very tall in his stance when he strikes, and as his hands drop down, he's a taller man, it just leaves his chin up there, and an overhand right or left could absolutely be devastating to put him down. And that's what we saw with Abdurrahimov. He was just landing strikes on a very exposed, very vulnerable chin that eventually ended that fight. He struggled with the hand speed of Shamil, who was really pushing forward. He was shooting strikes back over the top of what Sherman had to offer. And at the heavyweight division, you can only take so many of these before you go down. I would think Willis has the speed advantage, and the willingness to fight on the inside will shut down Sherman's kicks. That's why I expect to see Willis move in, look for takedowns and or close-range offense. Sherman's chin is just too vulnerable for my liking. He leaves himself too open to deal with the power of Willis. We haven't seen a lot of takedowns out of Sherman. I fully anticipate Willis will look for some of you can't score the early stoppage. If Sherman drags his fight in round 2 and 3, Willis could slow down. Those leg kicks could add up. That could be Sherman's best bet, is volume and damage. And, maybe losing that first round, surviving it, and getting into rounds 2 and 3 and taking the fight over then. I don't think it's going to happen, and my prediction is Justin Willis to defeat Chase Sherman by KO. In the co-main event of the evening, we are in the UFC's featherweight division in what should be a fun rematch, and has a lot of interesting storylines coming into it and coming out of it. As the third-ranked former lightweight champion, Frankie the Answer Edgar, 21 wins, 6 losses, and a draw, takes on the fourth-ranked Cub Swanson, 25 wins and 8 defeats. Now, this is a rematch from 2014 when both guys were building towards a possible title shot at then champion Jose Aldo. Edgar had won back-to-back fights coming into the matchup, and Cub Swanson had won a very impressive 6 in a row and was clamoring for an opportunity to fight for the title, looking for a rematch with Aldo from their WEC days. Now, Edgar won that fight by neck crank with just 4 seconds left in the 5th round. And then Cub Swanson, from that, he went on to lose to Max Holloway in his next matchup, who eventually obviously went on to be the champion. But Cub then rebounded and won 4 in a row and was right back in that opportunity, situation where he could fight for the title. Frankie Edgar ended up winning 5 consecutive fights leading up to his opportunity to fight Jose Aldo for the, I guess it was the interim title at UFC 200. He lost that matchup. He then won back-to-back fights again, looking to recalibrate, looking to work himself back into the title picture. And then both guys ran into an absolute fucking buzzsaw in T-City. Brian Ortega were finished and passed by Ortega, and now he gets an opportunity to fight for the title, most likely in his next bout against Max Holloway, and these two are left fighting each other, trying to get themselves lined up for the next shot. Physically, Cub 2 inches taller, he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 2 years. Now, not a lot has changed since the last time they met. Both guys are still looking for title shots. Cub, he's already fought Max Holloway once, and he was beaten by Holloway in a decent scrap, but Max was definitely the better fighter that night. Edgar, of course, heartbreaking for Frankie. He was lined up to face Max. Max pulled out. Frankie Edgar, being the monster, the animal he is, he said, yeah, I'll fight Brian Ortega, put that title fight on the line, and he lost a fight. That fight cost me a lot of fucking money that night. I remember I was watching it with a friend of mine, and we had money on the line, and my jaw just dropped open when he got knocked out, and I went, you gotta be fucking kidding me. So, hey, it is what it is. He lost that night, I lost that night, we move on. Now, you have to wonder, how does this, all the outside circumstances affect the performances? Cub comes into this matchup, he was a free agent, and he seemed a little unsure of his future. Was he coming back to the UFC? What's he doing? And then it's announced he's fighting Frankie Edgar. Now, Frankie Edgar, of course, losing that opportunity to fight Max Holloway and fight for the title, it could be absolutely crushing. I know what Frankie's like. He's been through so much, but could that be the time where it's just like, here, I got work back to the title, and I lost my opportunity. I might not get another shot. But, at the same time, you might come down to it, I got to win this fight, and I'll be next. The UFC might look at it and say, beat Cub Swanson, and then you get to face the winner of Ortega and Holloway for the title. We'll see. I don't know. Now, in their first matchup, it was an absolutely dominating one-side performance by Frankie. He outlanded the significant strikes 93-31, but more importantly, he landed 7 takedowns and just wore out Cub on the mat until he eventually got the finish at the end of the fight. And the first question you have to wonder about this is, has Cub done anything to show us he can stop a repeat performance if Frankie comes in? And to me, he hasn't. When he fought Tatsuya Kawajiri, he gave up 3 takedowns. When he fought Artem Lobov, of all people, he gave up 2 takedowns. Overall, 57% takedown defense, and he has given up big takedown numbers throughout his career. The Edgar fight was not a fluke, and I think that vulnerability still exists. Now, if he can keep it standing, he has good power. If he can turn this fight into a brawl, he could catch Frankie Edgar. It's very possible. And Frankie's coming off the first time he's ever been finished in his career. And that could absolutely change the dynamic here. It could change his willingness to step into the pocket and mix it up. He's fearless, and that's what makes Frankie Edgar so fantastic, is he just gets in there, he'll bloody his nose, and he'll fight. It seems that almost every single fight Frankie Edgar's in, he gets hurt, he bleeds, but that's the part that's great, is he just rallies and beats guys. But the big question is this the start of a fighter? We've seen it with a lot of guys. Is this the start of his vaunted durability diminishing and dropping off, and suddenly he's a guy who's getting knocked out every time he turns around? Look at Gray Maynard. He was a tough dude, and all of a sudden, boom, started getting knocked out every time he fought. Is this going to lead Frankie to getting finished? Or we see Frankie get finished back-to-back fights, and suddenly he's no longer a top contender. He's no longer nothing. It's also worth noting this is a 3-round fight. Last time they fought it was 5 rounds, and Frankie has had trouble in the past in 3-round fights getting off to strong starts because he's used to maybe a little bit slower start, and then rounds 2 picking up, 3, 4, and 5 he gets going, and that's where he wins the fight. Here, if you give up round 1 and don't put a good performance together early, you find yourself down, you might need to finish late. That's very interesting. It's also worth noting the KO defeat that Frankie suffered might actually drive him to rely more on his wrestling, more on his takedowns, and go back to what wins him fights and keeps him out of that danger zone. And that's something I definitely would not be shocked to see him do early and often, taking Cub Swanson down. But ultimately, until Cub shows he can defend takedowns from a dedicated wrestler, I can't back him up here. Cub might have a moment or two, but I think Frankie's going to be more active on the feet. He'll score takedowns. I expect a solid performance from Frankie Edgar. He rebounds here, and my prediction is Frankie Edgar to defeat Cub Swanson by decision. In the main event of the evening, we moved to the lightweight division for a matchup between two fighters who have been close but couldn't quite seal the deal, as the 4th-ranked Edson Jr. Barboza, 19-5-0, takes on the 7th-ranked Motown phenom Kevin Lee, 16 wins and 4 losses for Lee. Now, both men have recently taken a step back in their pursuit of the title, losing to the lead of the division. Lee losing an interim title bout against Tony Ferguson, and of course Edson Barboza going the distance but getting defeated by now champion Habib Nurmagomedov. Now for Barboza, he had won 3 in a row prior to running into Habib. He had decision wins over Gilbert Melendez and Anthony Pettis, and then knocking out Beneil Dariush to really put himself in that spot. For Lee, he had won 5 consecutive bouts, the fluke odd win over Michael Chiesa, and then beating guys like Francisco Trinaldo, Magomed Mustafayev, and Jake Matthews before getting submitted by Tony Ferguson. Physically, Barboza 2-inch taller. Lee will have a 2-inch reach advantage, which is, hey, it's reach advantage, but that's one thing that's worth noting, is he traditionally has he's got a very long reach, and he usually has a sizable reach advantage, so it's only 2 inches this fight, so that's worth paying attention to. He is the younger man by 6 years. Now, we've talked about other fights. We talked about Branch versus Thiago Santos. Again, this fight comes down to whether or not one man can take the other down or the other man can stay vertical. And if Lee can score takedowns, he wins this fight most likely. If he can't, he's in serious trouble. At the same time, Barboza has a bit of a questionable chin. It's been checked a couple of times. He's lost a couple of fights. But Lee really hasn't shown us that power. But again, at the same time, it only takes one square one. It could put anybody down, in this situation. We have to wonder for Barboza, how does the experience of fighting Nurmagomedov impact his performance? Does it hurt him or does it help him? Does it hurt him in that it took something away from him and made him more concerned about getting taken down and going through that again? Or does it help him in knowing that, hey, I got taken down by the champion, and I went 3 rounds with him, I took everything he had, I can get back up, I can fight, I can do this. And as that type of and his attitude is, if I can survive with him, I can survive with anybody, and make him more willing to engage. We'll see. Lee overall has relied heavily on his takedowns. Against Mustafayev, he landed 7. He landed at least 1 in all but 1 of his 10 UFC fights. He took down Tony Ferguson on multiple occasions in that matchup and had a lot of success on the ground early on in that fight. He scored some nice body lock takedowns. He's difficult in the clinch to deal with defensively. He'll fake strikes to set up a shot, and he changes levels very quickly and very smoothly. He doesn't telegraph his takedowns. He flows into that shot. Now, he did get caught in a guillotine attempt in the Mustafayev fight. I picked Mustafayev to beat him. Didn't happen, but hey, Lee's been on a roll of late. He eventually got out of it and went to work and got the finish in that fight. Once he gets on the ground, he's very active. He'll look to advance position. He's got smothering top control, and he'll look to wear guys down with that pressure and pace and eventually finish them on the floor. If he gets your back, look out, he'll go to work with some big strikes. Now, on the feet, he's not an overwhelming striker. His last 3-round fight, he landed 64 significant strikes. His best came against John Tuck, where he landed 74 overall. He throws a fairly long jab. He can have some success on his feet, but at times he seems to fade and let his offense dwindle a little bit, and he gets hit a lot. He's a guy who will stand in the pocket and take some damage at times as well. Now for Barboza, he's an absolutely nasty Muay Thai striker. Black belt in Taekwondo, so you see where those kicks come from. He is a BJJ purple belt, so he's not exactly a fish out of water on the mat. He has 9 wins by knockout. He is 7-2 on the scorecards actually now. He's absolutely lethal when he's able to set up his strikes. He has those fight-changing kicks, the turning side kick. He'll throw body kicks. He really digs his toes in if he throws a push kick down the middle. That hard right low kick that he took Pettis' base out with. He throws good punching combinations. The guy is a lethal striker. I like the way he has his hands up, ready to strike. He's very quick to deliver. He throws a left hook to the body, and then a right body kick combination. Come back to the inside. He can throw those very quickly, and it's very difficult to defend against. I really enjoy the way he pumps his jab out there. And again, he's so quick with his kicks that he's pumping a jab, and then boom, he's firing something into your midsection or to your legs and really taking it out. He threw a nice left counter on a couple of times and caught Anthony Pettis with it. Now, at times, he has struggled with pressure. His striking defense is a little bit iffy, 3.73 strikes absorbed per minute. His chin has cost him on a couple of occasions. And again, you wonder that damage from the Nurmagomedov fight, if that is still resonating with him. Now, he has improved significantly in his ability to deal with pressure. When Michael Johnson fought him, Michael Johnson pressured him, and Tony Ferguson did as well, and had a lot of success. His cardio faltered, his output faltered, and both guys were able to beat him. Johnson by decision, Ferguson eventually putting him away. Since those fights, I've seen Barboza, he's more aggressive, he's more live, he's more active with his striking. It's almost like he learned from those opportunities, and he's become a better fighter because of it. You know, he needs to make Lee work for takedowns. I can't imagine Kevin Lee's not going to get a takedown or two. Barboza needs to make him work for those takedowns and get back up and make him discouraging. Tire him out. Land body kicks and leg kicks. Take away that base. Take away his oxygen. Lee needs to take him down and finish him. I don't think Kevin Lee wants to get... This is a 5-round fight. I don't think Kevin Lee wants to get into rounds 3, 4, and 5 where he's been eating leg kicks and eating body kicks all fight. You know, if he can't... And of course, his cardio starts to back off and those takedowns become tougher and tougher. Barboza's going to eat him up. I think Barboza's going to have chances on his feet versus an opponent that's been hurt on multiple occasions by lesser strikers. He's had his chin, he's had his chin tagged a couple of times. He's been hurt to the body. We saw Trinaldo hurt him to the body. And I watch for that body kick. I think we can see a lot of damage from Barboza, and I think Edson Barboza rebounds here. And my prediction is Edson Barboza to defeat Kevin Lee by TKO. So those are my 6 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC Fight Night 128. All of my prelim predictions, I believe there are 7, are available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please head over there, check them out. You can subscribe to me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on YouTube. It's entirely up to you. Don't follow me at all. You can come on and trash the shit out of me if you want. It's entirely up to you. You can do whatever you want. It's a free world. I will respond, though, if you're a dickhead. Other than that, my bet packs are available for $15. Again, I put a lot of work into them. Sometimes they produce, sometimes they don't. I'm not your typical guy who's going to charge you $50 and give you 2 plays and hope they both cash. Sometimes guys are very good at that, and that works. Other times, you know, they're giving you like minus 300 favorites or scenarios that it's like, you know, okay, I guess this is going to win. I give you as many betting options as possible, and I say this is what I like. Here are my gold plays. Here are my silver, bronze. Here are my wild cards. Here are my prop bets. You play what you want to play. You play what you think is worth your look, and we'll go from there. I think we get a week off after this fight, so we got still lots of fights on the docket. Time to take a breath and prepare for our next set of predictions. As always, again, thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate all my fans, some more than others, but you know who you are. Take care, guys. Hi.